Willow Creek Springs presents Healthy Living with your host, Joe Grumbine.
Well, hello and welcome to the Healthy Living Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Grumbine, and today we're going to be diving into another episode of Healthy Living Through Adversity. I've got Juan with me, and we're going to jump right on into it. Juan, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I am doing great, Joe. Always a pleasure to be on your show, especially in this situation, and, spreading this information out and being a part of the solution. So there's just no greater experience for me at this time.
Well, it's wild. I believe this is our 7th episode we've done, and we covered a lot of ground, and I've learned a lot actually through this, and we've actually brought in, I don't know, I think I've at least scheduled half a dozen new guests that came from listening to this series. And it's a powerful conversation. We're talking about trauma and dealing with it. And, we've jumped into some different topics that were all centered around adversity. But the central theme about this and all of these issues, even the conversation about cancer, that's certainly a trauma, I can assure you that.
Yeah.
And we've been really getting into, your personal experience. You've been very candid and vulnerable and sharing, some of your life's experience. And last episode, we talked about some of the poems that you've put out, that you put into song form, and you were really getting into going through the lyrics, going through the verses and what they mean, and what's your thoughts on how we've been doing so far?
I am completely satisfied.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
This is a subject that's very, it hits home with me because, one, I've been on both ends of the spectrum now. I was that traumatized child, and now I'm on the healing end of it. And so I know about all of the confusion, the depression, the anxiety, the isolation, not feeling safe around people, and, just wanting to hide and be invisible, not trusting, not knowing how to have healthy relationships with people, being disconnected from everyone around me, and just like not even being in connection with my own body. And so it's like I was almost like just floating, and so, understanding all of that, when I started my healing journey, it was really, just for myself because, at nighttime, we are the ones that have to sleep in I have to sleep in my own head, right? I have to go to sleep with this head, this brain of mine. And if it's full of depression, anxiety, and confusion, and all these different things, it was just making my life so much difficult. It was just so difficult. And so now that I began that healing journey and began to heal and find that peace, it created this obligation, like I have to tell someone, like I have to tell people about, like there is healing out there. You're not stuck like that. You're like, it all makes sense if you connect the dots, if you can be courageous enough to go back and look at some of those wounded places and just be for yourself now. Give yourself that tender, loving care now that you should have had then. If you can get all that, you begin to find that closure and that peace and that healing. And so there's an obligation for me. And so it's an honor just to know that, like we say, even if one person, wants to find something worth that make their life better, this will all be worth it. So I'm definitely satisfied with it. And just we're going to keep swinging away, and hopefully we'll reach more people.
Well, last episode, I should say, we were talking about secrets and the propensity for people that have a trauma, like you're talking about, that's a high ACEs score, the more likely they are to not share it, for various reasons. And it sounds to me like now you kind of swung that around 180 degrees, and, instead of, living this world of secrets and lies and not being accountable, you're doing exactly the opposite. And you're not only sharing, your secrets, but you're explaining how important it is and how valuable it is for others to do the same.
Yeah, in one of our workbooks, it was talking about how many of us, we don't want to talk about, say, oh, my past is too painful to talk about and to go into. And it was shedding light on the fact that, hey, whether you talk about your past or not, it's still controlling your life, right? It is playing such a major role in every decision that you're making right now. So for me, once I came to that realization, like, hey, not talking about this is not going to solve the problem. And actually, it creates the problem, and makes the problem even worse. And so just understanding that part, I like using an example of, like, imagine, I look at trauma like alcohol poisoning,
Mm-hmm.
And, if once you consume too much alcohol to the point to where it's poisoning you, imagine someone who refused to throw up, right, because of the shame or whatever, right? They just like, I'm not going to throw up. Well, it's like, well, if you don't throw up, you're going to keep that poison inside your body, and it's going to kill you.
Exactly.
Well, trauma's the same way.
Your body trying to protect itself and get that poison out of it.
Exactly. Now, as unpleasant as vomiting may be, it is still it's an attempt by your body to save you. And so, because you have done something foolish, right? You consume this poison to the level that it was toxic. And so that's how I look at trauma. And me in my previous, I say my previous life, or with my old brain, per se, I was that person refusing to throw up. I was that person refusing, like, just keeping it down, keeping all that poison inside of me and not talking about it. And so it makes just as much sense to not talk about your trauma, which, as we know, that doesn't make sense at all.
Right.
Right. So if you just look at that, that's why now it's kind of like, I know I had once went to a rap show. They were doing this audition, and I submitted one of my songs, and I was talking about some of my traumas. And some of the hip hop rappers that were there, they were like, "Why would he talk about that? Why would he say that?"
Right.
And it's like it almost traumatized them by hearing it.
Right.
But
just
they don't
hear about it.
Right. But, it was really, but it just shows, like, I understand where they were at, too, because I understand that most likely chances are a lot of horrific things happened to them that they have not came to the place where they wanted to talk about.
Well, not that long ago, I did another second interview with Megan McDrew. And as you know, she's brought a program into the prison, and it involves a lot of people, a lot of volunteers, and a lot of discussion about traumatic things. And she was talking about the impact of this with, part of the whole healing element is to find a way to understand or be a part of a healthy relationship. And when volunteers come in and sit down and, they have this sort of ritual that they do about how the program starts and does the program and then completes it. She says, some real relationships happen, and it's a powerful experience to watch how people start to open up and to let their guard down a little bit when that sort of thing happens.
Yes. So as I don't know if I shared with you, I believe I did, but I just finished one of her cycles here, It's just the 23rd was our last class. I just sat in there. And let me just say, man, it's like, again, so I'm the recipient of everything that she's talking about. I'm one of the recipients.
Right.
And as someone in here, okay, so the most powerful thing about her program, what I love, is understanding. First, you got to understand that every one of us have been judged as bad people, right? And so with that judgment of being bad people comes the dehumanization and not being treated like you're human and being treated less than human. And that becomes our norm as we go through this legal system. Okay? And so for a program like that, where we go and sit down with people who see our humanity, they're not concerned with why you're...
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
They're not concerned with how bad you were. They're not concerned with any of that. They're just concerned about the human being and seeing the human being that's in front of them and understanding how we have been hurt to the point to where we can hurt someone else. And for most of us, no one has ever taken this time to hear our story. They have just all of a sudden looked at it, heard some things about what the legal system said we did, oh, he committed this crime, and all of a sudden formulated these opinions about who we are. But never has that actual connection to say, hey, like Dr. Bruce Perry and Oprah Winfrey say in their book, what happened to you? No one bothered to even understand, to have that much empathy and compassion to say, no, what happened? You know, you weren't born like this. None of us was born just violent.
Right.
You know, and we didn't choose where we were born to and things like that. So to me, when you look into the eyes of her volunteers, and I've had the opportunity to sit down with several of them, and right before we graduated, a couple of them came to me and said, Juan, I was really touched by what you shared. And I can't even explain it. To me, that was just, I felt the healing in it. I felt the healing.
Well, remember, I don't know if it was last episode or the episode before, I told you about the guest who was a counselor up in Indiana, and he had that Mosaic program where, you know, his whole concept of it was that we don't associate ourselves just because of a single episode or incident or trauma that's happened to us. Like, you know, I'm a quote unquote cancer survivor, but I don't identify myself as that. I don't put that as
You have 60 seconds remaining.
I'm a human being that happened to go through an experience that, you know, was part of it, but that's in no way who I am. And unfortunately, you know, if you get stuck in the legal system and you get convicted of a crime, that becomes your label. You know, you're a whatever, you know, that thing that you got convicted of. And many people, I think, attach themselves to that as, you know, who they are at this point. And I know a lot of people do that and treat people differently, like you said, dehumanize. I know the period of time I was locked up, it was all about, you know, dehumanizing the whole, you know, I was just a county jail system, but that was all about, you know, you're not a human, you're a prisoner, you're an inmate. And it didn't matter what you did or who you were, you know, the whole system in there was set to make everybody the same, and that was less than everybody else. And I can't imagine what, you know, it's like in other places, but I think to have a program where they focus on the humanity and they focus on, you know, the malleability of the human spirit, and that, you know, we have the ability to better ourselves, to change, to, you know, maybe we had a bad moment, maybe we did a thing, or maybe we had a thing done to us, but that doesn't identify us as a human being. I think he's dropped off for a second, but he'll be coming back on. And
Yeah, I'm back.
okay.
Yeah, I'm back now.
Perfect. So yeah, I was just talking about how a lot of times we identify ourselves or get identified because of an event, or, a series of events, something that we did or something we overcame or something we didn't overcome. And we end up getting attached or attaching ourselves to that. Sometimes a person who did something good, even, I was a football player in high school, and they don't ever get past that. Like, they don't go on with their life. They did this one thing, and that's who they are now. Or they went through a bad thing. I got in a crash. I got paralyzed, or I got a disease, or whatever it is, and they say, "Oh, I'm this person." And it's like, what? You're a human that's lived this whole life, and you're attaching yourself to this one thing. Like, who does
Right.
that?
Yeah.
But everybody does that, it seems.
Yeah. I mean, it's like we don't know how magnificent we are as human beings,
Exactly.
and so we like reduce ourselves to like this very limited like understanding of like who we are through what we do. And so that's where like, for me, coming to the realization of like, looking at all my experiences like a book. And it all makes sense to me, when you look at I mean, it almost every man that I sit in group with kind of has the same story, and we're talking about like 8 or 9 aces, and it's easy for someone who hasn't walked in the shoes of experiencing those 8 or 9 aces to say what we should or should not have done and what is or is not appropriate. But until you actually experience like the loss of sense of self, the loss of trust, the loss of safety, the loss of connection to your own body, the loss of how do you find yourself out of that hole when there is no manual? And it's kind of like it's one of those things where we just lost empathy for other people and the ability to even sympathize with what they've been through, to the point where we just project our own experiences onto them, imagining that, oh, well, I would have somehow did something different if I would experience the exact same stuff as you. And in actuality, may have done something way worse. And so that's where, to me, it's not about, and just to be clear, this is about healing from our trauma. It's not about, having a pity party or, trying to get people to feel sorry for us or anything like that. It's not about that. But at the same time, it's like you have to understand what you've been through in order to know. It's like that awareness. You have to become aware of it in order to know or to heal it. Because how can you heal what you're not aware of? And so for people like that, judge people or label people because of these things, it's just like they haven't come to an understanding of like just how every one of us is different. I can experience a trauma and someone else experience a trauma. And yeah, they may do something different. They may do something better. They may do something worse. But we're all different. And so when it comes to trauma, we don't need to hold the person responsible for the trauma that they experience and not being able to manage it well enough, because remember, we were kids when this happened to us and how that stuff affected our brains and things like that. Like we were children when these things happened. So it's kind of like insensitive for someone to even be on a judgmental level of saying, well, why did this person, do X, Y, Z? It's like we were children.
Right.
Right? We were children
Exactly.
who experienced the worst stuff that a human being can experience, and you wonder why we make terrible decisions in our teens and as young adults. I don't even know how that's surprising.
And the thing that nobody ever seems to get identified with is the characteristic of, I picked myself back up off the floor and kept walking. I realized that I failed, and I got up and started again.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
I made a decision to do the right thing. Like, we don't ever get identified with that. And that's the truth about the human experience, is that's the one thing that we have as a gift is that every day we choose who we're going to be, and we're not stuck being who
Right.
we were
Yeah.
yesterday. But I don't ever hear anybody identifying with that. I think that that's the thing. Well, I
Yeah.
definitely want to talk about another one of your poems, and that's actually been published as a song. And I know you were gonna
Yes.
get into the lyrics of that. And why don't we jump into that a little bit?
Absolutely. So this one is called Adverse Childhood Experiences. And this is the heart of like my song. This is my heart. I mean, all my songs are like my children. I don't love one more than the other, but this one, it definitely represents like when I first became aware of ACEs. And so I was in a substance abuse program, and this guy had given me this packet about adverse childhood experiences. Now, prior to this, I was asking my therapist, I was like, hey, how can I know how my, childhood experiences had affected me? How can I know if I healed?
Right.
And where am I at in that process? Am I in the middle of my healing? Am I at the end? How can I, measure this? And so my therapist here in the prison, they were not equipped to deal
They weren't
with
ready
this
for that question.
question. Yeah, and it was so sad because you're thinking about, think about that. The therapist in the prison was not equipped to answer that question.
Wow.
And here I am in the prison system who's supposed to, a part of their title is California Departments of Rehabilitation.
Right.
The corrections and rehabilitation, right? And so I'm like, well, if a therapist can't answer that question, then where am I supposed to get this question answered?
Right. Who the heck can, right?
Right? Yeah. And so thank God for Fritzy Horchman. And so she came into the prison maybe about, I think it was October of 2022. I went to her seminar, and she started talking about these ACEs here, which I had already seen the survey. I had taken the survey. And I remember when I was taking a survey, I was like, this is one test that I did not want to score 100% on.
Right.
And it was rewarding, to be honest with you, because I finally got the answers to the questions that I was looking for. But then again, at the same time, it was painful because for the first time in my life, I was able to see all of what I went through.
Right.
And that was the first time. And I remember like my eyes getting tearing up. But it was that bittersweet. It was a little relief, but it was painful too at the same time. And so, and I do what I normally do. I wrote this song to help get out some of that pain. And so this song was the result of that. And so I'll share first the chorus. I wish I knew then about ACE, because 8 out of 10 of them applied to me. No food, divorce, mom got beat, prisons, put downs, I got beat, unloved and unwanted fondling. Please tell someone about ACE. Hurt people, obviously. We become a product of what we see. And the critical thing about this is notice I say 8 out of 10. So when I initially wrote this, I thought I had 8. And it turns out later on as I became, it turns out I had 9. It went up 1.
Yeah.
The more that I had.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
Okay. So that's the chorus. The verse. I witnessed pops beat moms with a closed fist. Even though I was young, I would never forget. I became a product of ACE, generational trauma plagued with ADD. The fuel in my gas tank was power and control. From an early stage, I was set to explode. People became objects so I could harm them, unaware of the psychological scars I caused them. Locked in my own head, barely surviving. I failed the 2nd grade, accused of not trying harder, Juan. Don't let your mind drift. Concentrating so hard, I made my eyes squint. Mind shift, bell rung before I could catch it. Grade so bad I didn't deserve presents. D's and F's from elementary to high school. High school dropout to live by no rules. And so, go back to the beginning of that. So, in the beginning of this first verse, I witnessed Pops beat moms with a closed fist. Even though I was young, I would never forget. I became a product of ACE, generational trauma plagued with ADD. So this was the toxic stress. Now, this is just one example of the 9 ACEs. And so this was toxic stress. The bear, as we talked about in previous episodes, and like our first episode, the bear that comes home every night and releases, and so my body is releasing this cortisol
Right.
constantly. Okay? Now, the fuel in my gas tank was power and control. From an early stage, I was set to explode. So what sets the stage to explosion is being alone with the hurt. And again, these are from our previous episodes. Being alone with the hurt. So as a child, not having someone there after I experienced this traumatic event, not having someone there to help me process it. So I was there alone with the hurt. Absorbing the energy of my abusers, right? So we talked about that in previous episodes, how you absorb the energy of your abusers. Abandoning my authentic self, of the fractured self that comes forward, the pushing down of emotions, becoming what others want us to be for the sake of attachment. And so this pushing down, right? This is that explosive cocktail. Okay, all these things that we're talking about. And all
Right.
this causes depression, anxiety, confusion, numbness, lack of emotional intelligence, and the inability to describe how I feel. And that's what creates the bomb. Okay? People became objects so I could harm them, unaware of the psychological scars I caused them. And as we mentioned again in one of our first episodes, trauma creates a disconnect within the body, the mind, thoughts, emotions, and other people. And the goal is to try to reconnect to ourselves. And until we do that, there is no safe place. Like, no matter where we're at, it just doesn't feel like a safe place.
Right.
So locked in my own head, barely surviving, I failed the second grade, accused of not trying. Try harder, Juan. Don't let your mind drift. Concentrating so hard, I made my eyes squint. Mind shift bell rung before I could catch it. Grade so bad I didn't deserve presents. B's and F's from elementary to high school. High school dropout to live by no rules. And these are the symptoms of trauma. So my hypervigilance, dissociation, so the constriction in the body was the narrowing of the perception, right?
You have 60 seconds remaining.
Like, our bodies make us focus on the threat and only the threat, so it's hard to learn at school, right? Feelings of helplessness, immobility, hypervigilance, other name, shame, mental blankness and spaced out feeling, addictive behavior, inability to love, nurture, or bond with other individuals, diminished emotional responses. I had asthma, depression, feelings of impending doom, feelings of detachment, alienation, and isolation, reduced ability to formulate plans. And that's how all of this affected me.
Hi, this is Joe Grumbine, and I wanted to share an update. The platform that hosts this podcast has made some changes to the subscriber settings, and we have a number of subscriber-only episodes that we offer to the supporters, and for a minimum of $3 a month, we can get you signed up. And if you're already signed up and you're having some kind of trouble locating these episodes in the other platforms, I would say maybe the best answer is to unsubscribe and then resubscribe. I'm sorry for the hassle. I don't have any way to make a change, but I'm very grateful for all the support. Thank you.
Wow. That's some powerful stuff. It's hard to comprehend, you put down a lifetime full of issues into a few lines, and it's it's a lot to take on. And yet at the same time, if you just listen to it and you think about it, you probably are likely to identify with well, at least some of the elements of it. We've a lot of times pieces of this puzzle are pieces that are part of our own puzzles. And, I think lyrics like this can cause people to take account of maybe something that they haven't dealt with. I'm sure that's at least part of the intent of publishing this and putting it out there so people can hear it. Obviously you're expressing yourself and you're sharing your story, but at the same time, my guess is that at least one, probably many people that have heard this have taken a minute and gone, wow, I identify with that, whatever piece or pieces it is.
Right. Yeah.
I think he dropped off. So,
Hello?
oh, I thought you
No,
dropped off.
I'm
Sorry.
here.
Apologize. We'll clip this little part and we'll seam it back together. So
Okay.
where are we at now with the lyrics?
Okay, so that was the first verse. So now I wrote the second verse, and the second verse it's from a poem, and forgive me, I don't know the author's name. I heard it in group, and it's called "He Brought Me Flowers Today." And so this poem reminded me of the domestic violence that my father had put on my mother. And so this poem again, when I am motivated, I didn't choose to write this. When I'm inspired to write, it just flowed out. And so this poem, I heard this poem at the same time that I came across the Aces, and so this is just how I write and how I express myself, and this is my healing. So the second verse says, "Shattered bottles which contain suppressed emotions build up an explosion, the cycle of violence. The honeymoon is when abusers bring home flowers. They'll be peace for a couple of hours. Never mind the bruises, cracked ribs, black eyes. This time he promised he would never do it again. What about the kids? You must stay for them, huh? What if you get murdered in front of them? Then what? I know you don't think that can happen. Neither did the dead wife lying in the casket. When is enough enough? One time is too much. It escalates from there, it gets worse. From verbal abuse to torn shirts, then comes the choking in the hips, leaving marks with an open palm or closed fist. The problem is he doesn't see a woman, he sees an object that is his. If you stay, you're condoning his behavior. I know you're afraid to leave, and it's easy to stay, but please don't think, just leave."
And I imagine
And
that
so,
applies to so many people. I think that's a piece, like some of the elements are of the first verse weren't super specific about, the thing that you went through, but more the effects of it. This is really getting specific, and it's a thing that I think a lot of kids have gone through, and are dealing with somehow. And it's a rough one, because it's something that a lot of times kids might blame themselves for behavior of, their parents, their loved ones, the ones they're supposed to look up to and respect, or, who knows? There's all different ways it could go.
yeah. I mean, that's one of the most important things that, I hope that if there is a lady or men can be experiencing intimate partner violence as well. Either party, whoever is being abused, I hope they understand. I hope they understand that, the children are witnessing this. And as much as a parent may think like they're trying to protect the child, by staying in this relationship, or, they have to understand that the child is equally being victimized, and more so because of the adverse childhood experience and how that's going to affect the child and wire the child's brain in the future.
Right.
And so that was kind of the most important piece is for women or men, whoever's being abused, don't minimize this. Don't think that it's going to get better. Don't minimize it. It's a very serious issue. It escalates, as the poem says, and in the actual poem, the lady said her husband brought her flowers today, and it was after he had beat her.
Right.
And then it got to the point to where the last time he actually brought her flowers, it was to her funeral.
Right.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so that's the importance of this. It's just to advocate for anyone who is in an abusive relationship, not to stay in that relationship, not to expect it to get any better, and do the right thing, which is to leave.
100%. 100%. It breaks my heart every time I hear about a couple that's, got some kind of a violent history and they stand together for the kids. It's like, what does that even mean?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's that conflict, right? It's those opposing views. And I mean, I would imagine if any father, who has a daughter that's in an abusive relationship, would not want his daughter to stay in that abusive relationship for the sake of children. And in fact, if you're going to think about the welfare of the children, it would say you have to leave. It would say that you have to protect the children by getting them out of this abusive environment, not keeping them inside of it.
Right.
And especially when you think about how the child brain learns, and certain things that, because, again, absorbing the power of our abusers, and as they see that, depending on the age of the child, they may learn that that is the way that men are supposed to treat women.
Yep.
Or that is the way that women are, whoever is the abuser.
Right. Absolutely.
They learn that that's the way that, a relationship is supposed to work.
It's all they know.
And that's not, that's not how, and I came up and I remember dealing with women who, if they expected, because I didn't hit them, I didn't love them.
Oh, geez. Wow.
And that's, that was a real thing.
Wow.
And it's like, wow. I mean, can you imagine that?
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
Yeah, you would imagine that type of psychology, and it's very real.
Yeah. Wow.
So the whole purpose of this song is I hope that the Aces song becomes a game changer for me. Like I said, I wish I knew then about ACE. To me, it became like this cry, because I was like, how much different my life would have been had I actually had this information then.
Oh, absolutely.
And too often, most of our stories is we don't get this type of resources until we come to prison. And the whole push is to get this information out there into society to people like us before they come to prison, to interrupt this cycle of having to come to prison to get this information and these resources. You know, and it's like, well, if we can send this back out there, and that's part of what we're doing and what you're helping me do, is getting these resources back out there, you know, and to people who can actually use them, you know, before it's too late.
You know, there's going to come a day where somebody's going to come to me or you or somebody who knows us and says, you know, I want to share with you that I made a change in my life that likely kept me from going down that road, and somehow equating it to this song or one of the other poems that you put out. Imagine how that's going to make you feel.
You know, I tell you at times I struggle with my vulnerability and I'm shedding tears and crying. If I ever hear somebody say that, I guarantee you I am going to cry.
I tell you.
I am going to cry and be so relieved that, like, yes, I got ahead of it. I got ahead, you know. And
made a difference, yeah.
For the most part, yeah, to know you made a difference in someone's life. And, you know, to me, there's no greater reward. I mean, I sit in a group throughout my week. On Sunday, I have about 40-something participants. On Thursday, I have about 25 participants. So throughout my week, I'm at about 60, 70 participants, right? I sit in groups of about 70 people.
Okay.
And those are 70 people that I get to go through this whole cycle with. And I'm just looking for, and we're on our third cohort right now. And I just look at, like, just 1, 2, 3 of these guys, you know,
right.
If it's making a difference, yeah, like, we're going to get to somebody. We're going to change somebody's life.
The odds are, if you keep at it, putting this message out, you're getting, you know, better and better practicing your messaging. You know, that's what you're doing right now. I mean, everybody who keeps trying to help, they keep talking and they keep talking and they get better at sharing their thoughts. And each time you put it out there, you know, this podcast is out there like a lighthouse beacon. You know, once it gets published, it's out there forever. And you just never know, that one person in need that one time might stumble upon it and just happen to catch a part that made a difference. And, you know, you publish your song and it's on whatever platform. Somebody decides, let me download that. That sounds interesting. Next thing you know, they catch it in their head. They're listening to it a couple of times, and, you know, next thing you know, they start thinking about those words. And who knows, you know, some little piece of it sticks. So what you're doing, what we're doing,
yeah,
is powerful. And I believe, you know, we're having this one conversation one time, but it echoes out there for, you know, for virtually eternity. It'll be out there for people to find and hear and hopefully listen to.
Yeah. You know, as I hear you talk, it reminds me of the law of nature. And the law of nature, and especially, you know, in the Bible, it says that all labor produces profit. And just like you plant a seed in the ground, it's going to bear fruit.
Yep.
And what I thought about is like, just like my actions one day, they harm people.
Sure.
And I would think that my actions today, they heal people.
Right.
And it's all about the effort and the direction, right? So I won't be naive to think, oh, I'm good enough to harm someone, but I'm not good enough to heal someone.
Right.
I don't want to think that of myself, right? On the opposite is true. It's like, well, if I'm powerful enough to actually harm someone, then I have to be just as powerful to help someone heal.
Exactly.
And so that's kind of like where I'm at today. It's like, well, It's just the influence that we have on people, and all of us have that effect on people. It's how do we choose to spend our efforts? Do we spend our efforts in harming someone, or do we spend our efforts in helping someone? And so now this is
You have 60 seconds remaining.
the direction that we're moving in. This is what should define someone. And I think if someone ever wants to label someone, then you label them according to what they are doing today. You know,
Couldn't agree more.
today as a person.
I think that's a
Oh,
message.
go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think that
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
getting people to realize that today is the day that defines you. And if you can realize that, then you can decide, oh, well, this is what I'm going to do today then, and I'm going to define myself today.
Yes, exactly. And I would encourage all your listeners, if someone is being helped by this, please contact Joe and let him know that what he's
100%. I think it just dropped off. We'll clip this up and we'll go back to that thought to wrap it up. But yeah, this is amazing. I can almost feel that it's going to happen sooner than we think. Somebody's going to hear this and somebody's going to go, wow, you know what? I'm going a new direction. I heard this thing and I heard them talk about it and I realized something about myself and I'm gonna go work on it. If it I imagine that,
Yeah, that's the whole point, right?
yeah. I mean I can picture that happening like sooner than later. And somebody reaching
Mm-hmm.
out, sending me a message, or maybe they come on as a guest and say, I was listening to this one show and it got me thinking. And next thing you know, I decided to,
okay.
all right, let's rewind that. We'll clip this together, but let's go back to that central thought.
Oh, okay. Which thought was that?
Well, what you
If
were
this is
just
helping
talking
someone?
about, yeah, it's today. You have a choice to define yourself.
Yeah. So I was saying before I hung up, like if someone is listening to this and they're being helped by this podcast, like please reach out to Joe and let Joe know that what this podcast is helping you. I mean, you will be helping us by you'll be giving back to us and just knowing that we are helping you in that sense, in that regard. And to that extent, I think not only Megan McDrew, she's helped me, Fritzy Horseman, and there's a lot of other people that have came to my rescue, and hopefully I can be that for someone out there.
100%. Well, Juan, this has been another riveting conversation. Once again, we're going to go way too long, but it's okay. Uh, it's good. We're getting so deep into this stuff that it's worth it. Usually I clip these things down to less than 30 minutes, but we keep rolling almost double that. But it's okay. I think we're getting into things that are so important. They need to be discussed, and the conversation needs to come to a completion. Well, this is really a powerful song, a powerful message. And like we said, if somebody feels that they've been touched by this and listened to these lyrics and got them thinking, please reach out. Let me know. And, maybe come on as a guest and tell us about your experience. Well, Juan, I'm so grateful that we're doing this. We had another great one, and I'm looking forward to jumping into the next one.
Yes, thank you very much, Joe. And like I said, just so your listeners know, we're getting ready to launch our record label this year, and you'll be kind enough to partner up with us and to help us out with those endeavors. So I just want to let your listeners know, be on the lookout for some more of our music.
Beautiful. I'm looking forward to telling everybody about it. Well, this has been another episode of the Healthy Living Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Grumbine. I want to thank all of our listeners for making the show possible and this series, Healthy Living Through Adversity. And we will see you next time.
See ya.
This has been another episode of the Healthy Living Podcast. We produce this show so that people can share their stories, people that have overcome obstacles, people that are undergoing obstacles. We're building a community of health-minded individuals. If you're interested in supporting the show, please leave a review on the platform you're listening to it on. If you're interested in becoming a guest, please send an email to itsjoegrumbine@gmail.com, or you can send a note into the notes section of the podcast. All right. Well, thank you for supporting this show, and we hope you've enjoyed it.